All right, folks, welcome back for one short wrap-up lecture about corporate organization or about corporate moral responsibility and defective corporate or defective organizational design. Right, we followed Philip's argument. He has argued that corporations can be held morally responsible, and it's worth doing so in cases where the corporation itself is responsible for some act, that is, they acted for corporate reasons, intentionally brought about some outcome that led to some harm that they should have been able to foresee given the collective knowledge of the organization, composite mens rea, given the collective knowledge of the organization, they should have been able to foresee this harm. And no individual within the corporation bears responsibility for bringing about this harm because no individual in the corporation, as a result of defective organizational design, can be held responsible for not knowing what they would have needed to know in order to make the appropriate decision or the right decision in this case. And no individual in the corporation is responsible for defective organizational design within the corporation because of particular psychological facts about human beings and group psychology, or organizational psychology, I should say, that we engage in things like groupthink and risky shift that make it such that no individual can act. There are cases where no individual is in a position where they can act to change the organizational structure that they are a part of. Yet the organization itself can be on the hook because we expect more of the organization as a whole. We expect it to be constituted in such a way that it adopts the appropriate policies and practices that would lead to good decision making. And in fact, we might think that corporations that fail that test just should not exist, right? We as a society, we as a community have reason to disallow the creation of corporations that fail to be self-reflective in that way, right? So now we've got Philip's second question. Is holding corporations responsible possibly effective in preventing this sort of misbehavior or any sort of misbehavior by corporations? And his answer here is more tentative. He says, well, maybe it is. It might act as a kind of deterrence. One thing it might do is put future executives on the lookout for future misconduct and for poor organizational design. So executives that come in that are not yet fully integrated into the corporation, that aren't engaged in the groupthink of the corporation, they don't want to bear the shame or guilt of failing to stop immoral behavior by the corporation. And so they might come in on the lookout for these problems and try to change the organization from within. This, we might think of it as breaking groupthink, right? There are ways that it might be the case that holding corporations morally responsible makes it more likely that current or future executives within the organization will break that groupthink and act to change poor design. And he also thinks that this might happen via what he calls transference. So firms are instructed in moral behavior, he says, by instructing their members. If we want to get firms to behave in more moral ways, we have to get the members of those firms, the constituent beings, individuals who are part of those firms, to act in more moral ways or to shape the action of the corporation. Members are individually responsible to some degree for group behavior insofar as their participation in that behavior shapes that behavior. It facilitates and shapes that behavior. And so if we can get members of the organization or members of the corporation to feel shame or guilt for corporate misdeeds, to feel like, oh man, this company that I work for, it says do no evil, but sometimes it does evil, and I feel really shameful about that. If we can get enough people within corporations within a problematic corporation to think that, that could change corporate behavior, he thinks. So in holding, though no particular individual can be held responsible for the bad act, in holding the corporation as a whole responsible for the bad act, we transfer the guilt from the organization as a whole to the constituent parts of that organization. We don't hold any one of them particularly responsible, but we want them to feel shame on behalf of the organization or guilt on behalf of the organization so that they will put themselves in a position to change organizational behavior. That's the idea. So if that's right, then there is a practical upshot to corporate moral responsibility. There's a point to holding corporations morally responsible, and that's what Phillips wants to argue. All right, I will see you when we meet on Zoom.